So the opportunities here and to make it happen, the American dream does exist. Work is everything here. You get paid a lot of money in the States. In Holland, this guy with his Parkinson, he would be taken care of. People judge here much faster on your race, on your background, on your income level, on where you live, on what car you drive.
Hey, this is David and welcome back to my channel. I'm an American living in the Netherlands and I'm currently back in San Francisco. And I was curious, what is it like living here in the US as a Dutch person? So I was walking around the city and I randomly bumped into a Dutch guy who's been living in the US for about 20 years now. And we had a conversation, a great conversation about his life here and the differences between American and Dutch culture. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Well, thanks for joining me today.
Sure.
Well, first question is, where are you from?
I'm originally born and raised in the Netherlands.
The Netherlands.
A small town.
Small town.
Just south of Utrecht, in the center of Holland.
And now you are living in the States.
Yes, I've been in the States since 2005. 1 year in LA, then 5-6 years in the East Bay, and for the last whatever years in San Francisco.
Yeah, when did you arrive again?
2005.
2005, so almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years.
So curious to hear, what is it like living, working here as compared to the Netherlands?
Okay, let's start with work. So what is very interesting in the States is that people don't judge you on where you're coming from or what your accent is, or they judge you based on your skill set. So I was able to get into jobs that would be very hard in Europe. For example, if you, as a guy from the Netherlands, if you go to Paris or to Italy and you try to get a job there, very difficult. In the States, it doesn't matter what your background is. If they believe that you're the right guy for the job, you can get the job. So that's very refreshing. The downside is that work is everything here. I mean, people work their asses off, excuse my language. They work very hard. They work many, many hours. They expect you to work basically 24/7. And now talking about senior management positions, right? So I've been CEOs of a bunch of companies. So you're all in, you're all in. The upside is you get paid accordingly. I mean, you get paid a lot of money in the States, especially if you compare it to what you make in the Netherlands. But they don't expect you to take your holidays, really. And if you do take some holidays, they expect you to work during those holidays or be available during these days. They expect you to work many hours, which in Holland, if you take your vacation, you're off. You can take your vacation. You will pass on your work to a colleague, and your colleague will take care of the position. Even at the CEOs. If CEOs in Holland decide to take a break, which they will in the summer, 2, 3, 4 weeks, someone else will take care of the issues. Only when there are sort of emergencies will you be called or be contacted. So that's a big difference. That's a big difference.
Right here, it's really about living to work as compared to Holland, the Netherlands, where you work to live.
Yeah.
Did you have to adjust to that at the very beginning?
Not really, because I came here already quite senior. I didn't come here as a 30-year-old. I came here as like a close to 50-year-old. So I came immediately as a VP at the VP level, and became a CEO 2 years later from a medium-sized company. And I had lived in Asia for 10 years, so I've been there. And in Asia, it's also very hard work. I mean, in Singapore, I lived in Singapore for 4 years. And that was also a lot of work, a lot of travel, a lot of work. So I'm a little bit of an A-type as well. So I like that kind of work, and to be involved there. So that was not really I didn't really need an adjustment. But the adjustment is that the moment I go back to Holland, I meet my old buddies and my family, and we spend a lot of time not talking about work, not talking about politics, which is much harder here. It's hard to get friends, to make new friends, and to talk about stuff that is not politics or work or stuff. And I think I have one little theory here, and you might disagree with me, but in Holland or in Europe in general, there's a social structure that takes sort of care of you. If you get fired later in your job, there is an unemployment rate, and with that unemployment, you can survive. You can continue your life almost as you were living. Here, and there's a pension. There's always a pension. When you reach 62, 65, your pension kicks in. That's built through either the companies or private and government. Here, you have to take care of everything yourself. In other words, if you lose your job and you don't have a job, there's no fallback really. If you don't build up your pension, you don't really have a pension. You cannot live that same level. So everyone therefore is always busy working on their career, getting a better career, making more money, because you have to have enough money to retire or when you get sick. I mean, imagine this. I mean, I remember meeting someone when I just arrived in the States, and I remember watching my son's baseball practice, and it was this father who was shaking a little bit, so I think he had like a little bit of Parkinson. So I said, hey, what's up, how are you doing? He said, it's very hard, I still have to work. Here I have 2 kids in high school, and I have to carry them through college, which cost me $30,000 a year or $40,000 a year per kid. I just have to keep on working, but I'm getting sick. And I'm like, wow, in Holland, this guy with his Parkinson, he would be taken care of. And his kids' education would be taken care of. So if you don't have that social system, there is enormous pressure on making your hours, making the money, and living in the city, living in San Francisco. I mean, my daughter is a PhD student in Amsterdam right now, making 30,000 euros a year, and she has her own place. She never complains about money. She can have a decent life with that kind of money. Here, no way you can make it. You will be on the street after 4 months.
Yeah, it really favors the top 1 to 5%
Oh,
here.
God, yeah, it does.
And you also mentioned when you go back, what's different is that here in the US, especially in San Francisco, people's identities are tied to their work.
Very much so.
So you talk a lot about work. Over there, when you go back, you don't talk as much about work.
No, but also it's a political situation too, right? I mean, here, and of course Trump made it worse, but even before Trump, there was already very much you're either Republican or you're Democrat. These parties, and you cannot, if you have a Republican friend, you cannot even talk with that guy politics, because that's his ideas. And in Holland, we are used to, there's always a compromise. There's never a right or wrong, because our political system is based on coalitions of 3-4 parties. So we are raised in a climate where you always work together to come to a solution. Here, that's not so much the case. And therefore, people judge here much faster on your race, on your background, on your income level, on where you live, on what car you drive. All that stuff is not as relevant in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. So
Definitely, people judged you based on what you can provide. You mentioned skills. They judge you based on something external.
Yeah.
And that's very different in where you come from in Holland.
Yeah. Also, I mean, racism is serious here, man. Oh my God! And I come from Holland, and you've been in Amsterdam, and it's a friendlier place. Here, it's in my face all the time, and it's scary. But there's a lot of upside too, right? If you are in the 1%, life is really good.
Yeah, that's what I've learned as well. So if you are in that 1%, life can be really good here in the US, in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Every time I come back, it's always this reverse culture shock. I go on Market Street and I see the homeless there.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, the homeless were there as well.
Yeah.
But after spending some time
In Europe.
in Europe, in Amsterdam, where I'm sure there are homeless, but not like there are homeless here.
No, it's shocking for me too. Every time I come back, because I go back to Holland twice a year. I go back for like 2-3 months in the summer, and then for Christmas we were there for Christmas again.
Yeah.
And every time I come here, and I'll jump on my bicycle. Dutch guys ride bicycles, right? So I jump on my bicycle and I go on Market Street or whatever, and it's very, very sad, and very depressing. And then you read what people make
Yeah.
I mean, the money that people make is just insane. The top whatever percent, and especially in this city, it's so much money, and then they cannot get this stuff fixed. They cannot get it the result. But it's sad because you're right. In Europe, there is a different system, and but it's so sad. The moment you bring the European example in a conversation, it's immediately labeled as it's a socialist model, and it's not a socialist model. It's the socialism is only in Sweden. That's the last socialist country really that's left. So it's a model where people there is a state, but there's private enterprise. The healthcare is always it's a private and a state, matrix sort of structure. It's not a socialist. It's because my taxes here again. If you look at my tax bracket and you compare it with what I'm paying in Holland, it's about the same. Because I have state tax and I have federal and state tax and then some other stuff. And if you make more than 250 or 300,000, whatever, that creeps up. But look what you get in Holland, right? I mean, my health insurance, my annual health insurance in Holland is the same as my monthly health insurance in the States, my premium. I pay $2,500 per month for my health insurance. What do you pay in Holland?
For health insurance,
Yeah.
my company covers it, but most people will pay anywhere between 1 to 200 euros a month.
Yeah, right. I'm paying $2,500 a month.
Yeah, that's another story, right? Healthcare.
Yes, healthcare, education.
In the U.S., education.
Education.
In the U.S.
Education. So there is I mean, I love living here because it's the weather is great. I have a bunch of friends that are great. The quality of life is good. The food is great. The travel is great. And I built a community, around myself, and I have a lovely wife. So and my kids are one in Holland, one here, somewhere in Portland.
Yeah.
But so what attracted me into the States, finally, before we stop this, what attracted me into the States versus Holland is the opportunity. So there's this business opportunity that says, whatever it takes, if you're the guy, you can do whatever you want to do, basically, and you can get into positions and jobs. And there's no shortage of money. There's no shortage of opportunities. And that attracted me a lot. In Holland, it's much harder. To get the job, it's all like together. You have to be socially correct. You cannot really. If you fail at something, you're labeled as a failure. Here, you just move on. So the opportunities here, and to make it happen, the American dream does exist. Unfortunately, for a small number of people, and I was fortunate to be in that position. Yeah.
So it sounds like you came here with that expectation. After 20 years here, were the expectations met?
Yes, definitely. There are no real surprises that way. I'm saddened by things, but those were there 20 years ago too. It hasn't really changed. Political has changed a little bit, but that's globally, right? The global situation, what's happening with Putin in Ukraine, what happened in Brazil, so what happened with Trump, the populist movement, and then you had COVID. So that's a sort of a global phenomenon. So that made it a little bit more extreme. But no, I'm not really. There have not been major surprises. Yeah, okay. And I'm still involved with private equity firms, and gosh, man, the number of opportunities that we're looking at and investing in and turning around, it's just amazing. And in Holland, that would be, you have to be very lucky to be in sort of that position, that situation.
Makes sense.
Much harder.
I have one last question, and that's, you've been here for almost 20 years, so curious to hear, how have you changed, and what about you, the Dutch part of you, has remained the same after 20 years?
The Dutch part of me is that it's very important for me to be among friends and to have that social. So the Dutch word is gezelligheid. So gezelligheid for me is still very, very important, and I miss that sometimes. I'm like, why is it so hard to get invited at someone's house for dinner? While in Amsterdam, I just knock on the door, or you yell from the street and say, come on up. I still, when I go back to Holland, I can still bump into my friend's house and they will always invite me in for a cup of tea or something. Here, they're like, sorry, my schedule, sorry. I'm like, are you kidding me? So the gezelligheid is something that is really very dear to me. And that's something that's why I always go back to Holland too. I mean, I will continue to go back to. I don't want to live back in Holland. I don't have the desire because I like my freedom and I don't have to be part of certain things in Holland because Holland is at the end of the day a very small community. So I like that it is so much larger here, but I do go back to look up and to have that little gezelligheid with friends and family and stuff.
Okay, definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Nice that
and
that you run into me.
I know, so random, but I
very
guess
random.
you know, I believe
It's faith.
things are connected.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
So what are your thoughts? I found it interesting, although I wasn't surprised, especially the work culture part. Are you Dutch or European who is or has lived in the US? I'd be curious to hear what have your experiences been like living in the US. Leave them in the comments below, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.